good. Just make sure there's no glitches.
Mm-hmm.
Should be set now. Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, she's not even connected to audio yet. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation. Katie, can you go ahead and just keep an eye on people as they're coming in?
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
I said, can you go ahead and let people in as they show up, and I will go ahead and start the presentation.
All right.
Let me just make sure this is all set. Make sure it's set up on the live stream. All right, should be good to go. All right, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining today. This is the Transfer Admissions Masterclass hosted by Accepted Consulting. I am Kaylin Grace Apple, the founder, and I am joined with Katie Ibsen, the head of transfer admissions here at Accepted. Today we're going to be talking all about community college transfer processes into both in-state, out-of-state, and public and private universities. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is also being live streamed on YouTube, so be sure to check it out if you miss anything, and be sure to stick around till the end in order to receive a discount code to meet with our transfer team. All right, so just a little bit about Accepted Consulting. Accepted Consulting was the business that I founded on the principle of providing access to higher education for students around the world. One thing that I saw as in my own experience was that there was some gatekeeping in terms of information that was available, and oftentimes transfer admissions counselors or transfer counselors at my community colleges did not have the resources or knowledge to help me with processes outside of my state. Most of them understand the kind of in-state admissions process, but lack the language to describe how it is that you should be applying for private institutions. And so that was one of the main principles that I wanted to focus on with Accepted, was providing that information to community college students and providing them with the resources, not only in the admissions process, but beyond the admissions process, in order to succeed in higher education. Katie?
All right, so in today's Transfer Admissions Masterclass, we'll be going over everything that you need to know about the transfer process. So we're going to be starting with our personal transfer journey, our respective journeys, so that way you get a little bit more of a background into who we are and how we got to where we are today. In addition, I think it's really important to share our transfer journeys because everybody has a unique story, and it helps bring awareness to the fact that transfer students come from all over the place and from all different parts of life. Then we're going to talk about the differences between the application process for private, in-state, out-of-state, public universities. We're also going to talk a little bit about planning your community college coursework so that you can set yourself up for the best transfer, the smoothest transfer possible. And lastly, we'll go over the application process in detail.
Wonderful. So just some quick introductions. My name is Kaylin Grace Apple. I am the founder of Accepted Consulting, and I'm also known online as the Redhead Academic. I run a YouTube and Instagram account as well as TikTok focused on higher education and my own experiences as a graduate student. In addition to being the founder of Accepted Consulting, I was once a community college student. I went to 4 different community colleges before and ultimately transferring to UCLA, where I received my BA in History and African American Studies before going on to receive my master's at Oxford, and am now heading into my 2nd year as a PhD student in History and African American Studies at Yale.
A little bit about me. My name is Katie. I am the lead transfer consultant at Accepted Consulting. I also go by TheVintageAcademic in the online world. I got my transfer degree at Sacramento City College in the Central Valley, and then I transferred last fall to UC Berkeley, and I study anthropology with a focus in archaeology.
Wonderful. So Katie and I both come from very similar backgrounds. We both started in high school and had a very challenging time kind of seeking out the grades that are often needed in order to apply to college. Both of us ultimately decided to go to community college, but in my personal experience, ended up taking a gap year, which we'll get to in a second. But both of us have ended up transferring to public universities, the top ranked public universities in the United States, and going on, myself into graduate study and Katie hopefully into graduate study starting next year. All right, so just a little bit of background about my personal story. In high school, I had very poor grades and ultimately did not have very many college prospects. And I had told my dad that at the time I wasn't ready to go to college and that I really wanted to pursue a career as a professional athlete. I ended up riding horses professionally starting at the age of 18 until 21. My first community college course was the fall semester after I had graduated high school, in which case I ended up with a 2.0 GPA and a letter from the dean stating that I needed to make sufficient progress in the program or otherwise I would be dropped. I attempted to take a couple other classes, ultimately withdrawing from community college altogether and deciding to focus on my riding career. A couple years later, though, I found that I was really interested in studying history and returned to take a couple community college courses, which ultimately led me to transfer. I pursued the transfer process on my own. My mom helped review my essays, but I didn't really feel like I was getting the support I needed from the community college counselors in order to figure out where to go next, which is why when I went to UCLA and was heading to Oxford, I wanted to create a YouTube channel which provided these resources for community college students to help them navigate the admissions process, as I felt very unprepared to do myself. And ultimately, I pursued my master's at the University of Oxford and wound up here at Yale. So if my story says anything, it is that you can start from just about anywhere and figure out how it is to make it to your ultimate goal. And if the IVs are something that you would like to pursue in the future, then starting from ground zero and starting from a 2.0, it is still possible.
So like Keelan said, we have very similar backstories. I was never a professional equestrian. However, I did do very poorly in high school. I almost failed out of high school. I graduated with a 2.2 GPA, just barely. I went to summer school every year and I was in remedial math classes every year. And after high school, I decided it was time for a break. I was super burnt out from trying to keep up with information I was just not understanding. So I took a gap year. After that gap year, I decided to give community college a try and ultimately ended up failing one class and getting a C in the other class. So I didn't start off on a very strong foot, but I did find my footing. I found anthropology, which is something I'm very passionate about, continued to do much better in community college with the support of my friends and family and other academics like Kaylin, and ultimately ended up applying to transfer to UC Berkeley. So when I applied to transfer to UC Berkeley, I'd gone from a 2.2 high school GPA to a 3.8 community college GPA. And when I applied to go to UC Berkeley, I was in the process of also trying to find those really important transfer admission information that is hard to find on the internet. At that time, I had also started putting together my own YouTube channel about what it was like to be a community college student and go through the transfer process, which is ultimately how I found Kaylin. And Kaylin was actually the person who helped me edit my essays. I was her very first client. And with the help of Kaylin's amazing skills, I put together some essays and learned which things from my personal experience to highlight on my application, and ultimately gained admission to not only UC Berkeley, but all of the other UCs that I applied to, including UCLA.
Wonderful.
So next, I think we should talk a little bit about why community college. If you are watching this because you're thinking about going into community college and want to be prepared ahead of time, then this is something we should talk about. So first of all, something that I'm sure everybody thinks about is the cost of college. The cost of college in the United States is notoriously high, and community college gives you that opportunity to access affordable education in such a way that it will get you through your first 2 years of college and then into a public university like UC Berkeley. So you can see here on the slide that nearly 25% of students don't go on to college because of the cost, but community college costs a fraction of the price of a four-year institution. And like I said, you can get that first 2 years of education before moving on. Secondly, there's grades, and this is something that Kaylin and I personally experienced. If you're not getting the grades that you need to get in high school to be competitive with the universities that you want to go to, the community college is a really good option for going back and not starting at ground zero, but giving yourself a better chance to succeed academically and prepare yourself for a four-year university. Additionally, when it comes to studying at community college, it affords you the flexibility to explore other options and try and pick out a major before going to your four-year university rather than going to your four-year university when you're 18 years old and having to pick a major. Lastly, we have commitment. If you're not ready to go to a four-year university like I was when you're just getting out of high school, community college is always there for you no matter how old you are or what part of life you're at. And it also provides opportunities like a transfer admission guarantee here in California and other transfer guarantee programs that help you get into the universities you want to go to.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about community college coursework. So the one challenge with community college coursework is that there are varying requirements when you're thinking about applying to different schools. So if you're going to apply to a private institution, say out of state, then the requirements may be that you need between 60 semester units or 90 quarter units in order to transfer. This is going to vary depending on the school. This is often for people that are going to be transferring in as juniors. There are some schools that allow you to transfer in sooner, but you want to make sure that the courses that you are taking in community college are actually transferable to the school that you want to attend. As Katie mentioned, there are transfer guarantee programs and other types of contracts between community colleges and state schools that allow you to be aware of the types of courses that you need to take and to make sure that everything that you are taking is actually going to count. One thing that varies is between the different systems, even the systems like the UC, so the University of California versus the California State University system, is the types of courses that are actually counted. So for example, there was a writing course, a creative writing course that I took in community college that did not count for UCLA, so did not count for the UCs, but it would have counted for the CSUs. So one thing that you can do is look at the various systems and try to see what's going to actually count to transfer. One way you can do this is talking to a transfer counselor at your school. Other resources include Advisorly, which is an application currently being created by a group at the Berkeley School of Business. So there are various systems that you can actually use and implement within your search in order to figure out which courses are going to count. But this is one thing that you're going to want to review either with a transfer counselor through those online application systems or meeting with one of us. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the general timeline. So the community college timeline doesn't have kind of like a set system. So while some students choose to transfer within 2 years, some take 4, some take less. So you want to make sure that in this pre-application process that you're beginning to discuss your plans and begin to develop relationships with professors, perhaps because they may offer a letter of recommendation in the future. Additionally, you want to meet with the counselors at your university, at your college in order to figure out which classes are going to count. So checking those course requirements. Next, you're going to want to look at the actual application. So when you're looking at what types of applications you may file in the future, this is going to include the private institutions, the public. You're going to look in and out of state, look at the schools that you're most looking to apply to, and then make sure, again, that you're going to meet those course requirements and that you are aware of those course requirements before you start taking classes. The next thing is the application. So this usually happens at year 2 in a community college. For me, it happened at year 4. It varies depending on your own experience. Some students take community college part-time, or you can take it as a full-time student. You can even overdo your course load in order to speed up the process. So the time in which you actually hit the application process is going to be very dependent on your own personal goals and timeline. Within the application, you're going to need to send all of your transcripts. So just be aware of where it is that you are attending and what types of transcripts you're going to need to be collecting. You're going to draft your essays and begin revising materials with a professor, a friend, a consultant, or an advisor. This way, you are making sure that the application is actually going to essentially reflect who you are as a candidate. But beyond that, if you work with a professional in the transfer admissions field, then they can also help you cater that application to the school specifically. Additionally, another thing to remember before you submit is to file your FAFSA form. So anywhere you are in the United States, you need to file a FAFSA in order to be considered for financial aid. This is going to include grants. It's going to include other types of scholarships that are offered by the university, as well as public loans. Then after you've applied, you've waited a couple months, it's time for the decision. Decision dates are going to vary. Application deadlines are going to vary depending on where you're applying. But regardless, you should start hearing back in the spring from the universities. And you will also receive the financial aid letter, which will help you make the decision on where it is you would like to go next. And if you ever come to that stage and are looking for a little bit of assistance to figure out what is the next step, my recommendation is to talk to either your friends that know you best, a counselor, or perhaps a transfer consultant.
So next, let's talk about the components of your application. So when you've decided that it's time to start working on your application, get that transfer journey started, here are the things that you're going to need to know. First and foremost, the essays. The college essays are, in my opinion, the most important part of your application. It's the part where you get to contextualize who you are as a person and really tell those schools why you would make a good candidate for transfer. So when it comes to essays, there are different types of essays. There's the common application, which many of the universities in America use, and that's typically a longer essay. And then the UC personal insight questions, or like smaller personal statements, those are shorter and often prompted essays that ask you specific questions. Next is transcripts. Like Kaylin said, keep track of all of your transcripts, which colleges you're going to. Like Kaylin said, she went to multiple community colleges. You're going to have to gather all of those transcripts and submit that along with your application to make sure that you have, again, fulfilled all of your coursework. The next is letters of recommendation, and the UCs do not use letters of recommendation, but other private institutions or out-of-state schools might require these. This is, part of developing that relationship with your professors, and something you should also do once you reach your four-year university for future applications like grad school. And that is, to gain that letter of recommendation to, again, show the universities who you are as a person, how your professors have interacted with you, and how they value you as a student. And then lastly are the supplemental essays. These are in addition to the longer essays that you might find on the common application. And those are things that help you elaborate more on who you are as a person and the various components of your personality. So like we said before, there are multiple types of essays that you might be asked to write for your transfer application. So the first is a personal statement, and this is something that you would find more typically for a private institution or an institution outside of California. This is a 500 to 1,000 word essay, and it's going to ask you to outline your background, your educational experience, and why this university. Next is the personal insight questions, which are a set of questions of which you have to select 4 to answer, and they cover various topics such as leadership experiences, how you express your creative side, any significant struggles that in your life that you think the university should know about.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about how to write a personal statement. So there is a specific art to writing these statements that you can read all about. There are books upon books about how to write personal statements for colleges, but here is the general outline. So the beginning of your essay should essentially touch on your purpose. So this is sorry about that. This is meant to cover a personal anecdote about something in your background that you believe connects to why it is that you would like to go to university. make a connection to your major or your field of study or the thing that you are interested in pursuing, and how it is that that's going to then connect to your future studies at that university. So for example, I wrote an essay about my love of history, specifically looking at Thomas Jefferson and how I really liked reading biographies on the early American founders, and how I came across this book called Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy by Annette Gordon Reed, which made me reevaluate my view of early America. It made me really face up with the realities of slavery in early America, as well as the relationship, loosely defined, between Jefferson and Sally Hemings. This then led me to want to continue to study history and led to various changes in my own personal beliefs and values, including my political stances. So this is something that was a big shift for me when I was in community college, and this is what I really centered my essays around. I then obviously made that connection to my major. So that's section 1 of the personal statement. In section 2, you're going to go into background. So background should be essentially 2 to 3 things that you think in your background that you believe are the most relevant. This should include courses that you've taken, essays that you've written, perhaps a research project that you did, or an extracurricular activity that you were involved in, or a job that you perhaps held while you were in community college. You want to make the connection between the skills and the problem solving that you have developed as an individual because of these background experiences. And then finally, in the final section of the personal statement, you're going to indicate why you want to go to this school. This is where you want to make sure that you are being as specific as possible. What is it about this university that will give you the training, will give you the opportunities to help you pursue your future career? You want to make a statement that goes beyond just saying that this is a top-ranked university with a variety of faculty members with various expertise. You want to go even further. What do they specialize in the department? Are there research opportunities? Are there research opportunities for undergraduates to work under a professor or a current graduate student? These are the types of things that you want to indicate in your why section in order to let them know on the admissions committee that you are committed to that school, not only because it is a good school, but because you are looking to actually get something out of it yourself.
I will give one caveat to what Kaylin said. When you're filling out these applications, make sure that the application that you're sending is going to the university that you're intending it to go to when speaking directly about that school. When it comes to universities like the UC, it's one application that goes to all of the campuses that you'd like to apply to. And in that situation, I would recommend not being specific, because if you say, I want to go to UCLA and then send it to UC Berkeley, they're going to notice that. But so moving on from personal statements, when it comes to the personal insight questions, there's a variety of prompts, like I said, but there is one required prompt for transfer students. And this is where you're going to go into that background that we were talking about in personal statements, discussing why you chose that major and how you prepared for it. And it's not just listing all the coursework that you've taken that should theoretically make you a good candidate for studying this major, but you want to connect it to some kind of personal experience that you've had, something that has really spoken to you in your life that has made it so that this is the major that you want to pursue, and how this major specifically is going to help you in your future career path down the line in pursuing what it is that you outlined earlier. So this is, for example, when I wrote my personal insight question to my required prompt, I discussed my first archaeological experience and how that experience really solidified for me that I knew that archaeology and through the path of anthropology was how I wanted to make an impact on the world, and that I wanted to use archaeology in conjunction with the indigenous tribes of the area and the federal government to protect our cultural resources. So I used that personal experience to connect to my major, to contextualize and show the universities that this is why I want to do what I want to do and how they're going to help me do that. So we have a couple of do's and don'ts for you when it comes to writing your applications. Some of the very first tips that I'm sure anybody would give you is, give yourself plenty of time to prepare. I don't recommend writing your application essays the very last second in the 11th hour. Give yourself enough time to brainstorm topics, Start writing out rough drafts and get feedback from people that you trust in order to help you write the best essay that you can write. Create a strategy, again, outlining when you're going to get things done, how you're going to get them done, and reaching out for resources such as YouTube, the Transfer Center at your college, and accepted consulting. Lastly, like I said, seek a proofreader. At the very least, read your essay out loud to yourself like you would do with any college essay. This is really important because you want to make sure that it's not only grammatically correct and free of spelling errors, but that it flows and that it has that narrative that you're looking for to show the universities that you're applying to who you are and why you're a good candidate. Under the don'ts, don't leave your application to the last minute. Not only is writing your essays at the last minute a bad idea, but also there is more to the application than your essays. You have to fill out your personal information, your extracurriculars, any work experience that you've had, and that takes some time. So make sure you're giving yourself enough opportunity to fill it out. Additionally, systems can crash when students are trying to submit their applications at the last minute. So make sure you're giving yourself enough of a buffer that if anything happens, you can still meet the deadline. Don't submit any work that you haven't proofed. Again, grammatical errors, punctuation, spelling errors, but again, making sure that you're conveying all of the information that you want to convey. And very lastly, do not submit a generic statement. This is I want to go to this university because of XYZ, or as I like to call it, the resume application where you've listed all the coursework that you've ever taken. And don't ever copy another student's essay. I think it's okay to gain inspiration from other people, but making sure that this essay comes from your unique perspective and that it's about your unique story.
All right, so we just wanted to give a little bit of insight as to why we chose the schools that we chose in the end. I ended up applying to 14 different universities when I was applying to transfer, which is a very high number. I applied both in-state, out-of-state, public, and private. And so ultimately, I applied to the UCs and the University of California system because I was essentially trying to appease my parents. At the time, I was very set on wanting to leave California. I really wanted to move to the East Coast. I was very set on wanting to go to the College of William and Mary in Virginia. And when I got into UCLA, I had immediately brushed it off because I was like, oh, I don't really want to live in LA. But I had a friend who luckily told me that I should give it a second look, that it was a school that had a really wonderful history department and that would have various opportunities for me that I shouldn't brush off lightly. So I did my research. I looked at the history department and began looking through all the courses that were going to be offered, and I got so excited. I ended up looking at the faculty listings and finding people I was really excited to potentially work with. And when I looked at that in comparison to what was being offered at my dream school, I realized that UCLA was the better fit for me. Not only was I going to be within a 5-hour drive from my family, but I was going to be in a lively urban center in LA, and the history department was going to offer various opportunities for research, which I thought would be valuable if I decided I wanted to go to graduate school or law school, which at the time was my goal. So those were a couple of the reasons why I chose UCLA. But on top of that, once I walked onto campus, I was immediately sold.
When it comes to choosing UC Berkeley, when I first realized that transferring was something I could do, it was because of UC Berkeley. I was at the Phoebe Hearst Museum, which is the anthropology museum on campus, with my community college anthropology club. And it was the first time that I realized that transferring was something that people did and that UC Berkeley was a place people could transfer to. So when I had that realization, I started doing more research and looking into the different types of programs that were available in California for transfer, and then what kinds of programs offered anthropology. I ruled out the CSUs because I knew that I wanted access to research. And while the CSUs do have some research, the UCs are research-based institutions. So I knew that going to a UC would offer up more opportunity for research. I would be closer to museums. And when I started looking into the coursework in the faculty in the UC system, it really came down to a couple of universities. It was UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and UC Berkeley, who had the coursework and the faculty members that were things that I wanted to learn and people I wanted to learn from. When I applied, I had it in my head that I kind of only really wanted to go to Berkeley, not only because I was in love with the university and the campus and the coursework, but also because it's close enough to home that it's an hour-and-a-half drive, and I have some extenuating family circumstances that make me want to stick close to home. Additionally, when I received my letter of admission or my acceptance letter, UC Berkeley was the one that offered me the most financial aid, and I am a low-income student, so that financial aid package was extremely important to me. So when you put the whole package together, financial aid, distance from home, and access to research opportunities and the coursework that I knew would set me up for my future career as an archaeologist.
Wonderful. All right, so let's talk a little bit about thinking ahead. So now that we've gone through the application process, we talked a little bit about the coursework requirements and have given you a rough idea of where it is that you'll be headed. A couple things to keep in mind. So scholarships for transfer students are often posted very early. You are required to send these in around the same time that you will be applying to these schools, whereas if you were applying for college when you were in high school, those deadlines may have been further out. So a thing to keep in mind is when you are looking to apply for transfer, also look at scholarships alongside it. If you need assistance looking at scholarship opportunities and seeing what may be available to you given your demographic, then please feel free to reach out to us. This is something that we help with. The next thing is review. So make sure that you aren't afraid to review your previous coursework and just make sure that you're taking courses that are going to fit within the school that you're applying to. Again, this is just what we talked about earlier, which is to think ahead with a transfer counselor or with a consultant like ourselves and discuss what the opportunities are. And also to see what kind of courses are going to be applicable for your potential major versus what may not. And next is to find community. So communities can mean a variety of things that can be within your own community college. But one thing that is a resource that was very useful for me was the Facebook groups for UCLA and for all the other universities that I applied to. So oftentimes you can look up the name of the university and then add the word transfer, and there's usually a Facebook group attached to it if the transfer center is large enough. And if you're having trouble looking for these types of resources, also look to Instagram or to LinkedIn or other transfer pages that may be available online and see what resources they may offer. All right, so a little bit about our transfer team. Obviously, you've just met myself and Katie. We are focused on transfer admissions, and I focus on the humanities and social sciences primarily, as well as the private institutions. And Katie, as our lead transfer consultant, heads up the transfer division and focuses on both public, private universities all throughout the United States. So if you have any questions about transfer admissions, please feel free to reach out to us, but Katie is the head of transfer, so reach out to her first. In terms of services offered and accepted, we offer consultations as well as full application review services. This will vary depending on what it is that you're seeking out, but my recommendation is to start with a one-on-one consultation with Katie and to discuss what your goals are before deciding what to do next. Another resource that we now offer at Accepted is Accepted Society. If you are if you're perhaps in your first year of a community college, or you're just trying to figure out what it is that you are looking to accomplish and you're trying to figure out your study habits, Accepted Society provides resources for academic success in the long term. So while consultations are focused on the admissions process, Accepted Society is there to provide you with the resources to help you succeed as a student overall. All right,
so now can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
I'd like to mention that we also host free office hours. So if you have either a simple question, you want to get to know us better before committing to a consultation, you can go ahead and find those on the website. It's a great way to get to know us and see if a consultation would be a good fit for you.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to the Q&A section. And before I close out the slides, be sure to write down this discount code. You can use the discount code Masterclass5 for 5% off of a consultation, or you can also use the code Masterclass5PAC for the full application support service and just make sure to write these down so that way you can use them yourself when you go to book a session. And I'm going to go ahead and close out, and we are going to start the Q&A. So be sure to write any questions that you have in the chat box. We are also live on YouTube, so if you are joining us from YouTube, please feel free to ask your questions in the box over there as well. I see a question about Oxford, but this is not a masterclass focused on graduate admissions. So I'm not going to be covering information on that today, but we will be hosting future masterclasses on graduate school admissions, and I do speak about Oxbridge over there. Additionally, you're also welcome to raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask your question if you feel comfortable doing so.
While we wait for questions to come in, oh, never mind, here's one. Have you helped science major students to transfer?
Yes, we have.
Yes, I think we've helped a wide variety of majors to transfer.
Yep. We've worked with engineering students, I've worked with math students, as well as various students in the humanities, psychology, humanities, social sciences, etc. So yes, we do work with students that work in the STEM fields. Hamza?
Hi, yeah, my name is Hamza, and I'm a prospective transfer applicant for sophomore year. I think I sent like a really, really long question to Katie, and I think I'll like cut that down a little bit. So I'm applying to, so I live in Maryland, and I'm applying to Johns Hopkins as a anthropology major. I was wondering, does taking more credits in a semester make you more competitive applicant, or does it like not affect, like within, does it, or does it not like affect at all like the competitiveness of your application?
Overall, this is going to depend on the GPA. If your GPA is really high and you're showing that you are able to handle a really significant course load, that's only going to work in your favor. However, if you're taking a heavy course load and it is affecting your GPA, then that will look like you are taking on too heavy a load. So it's just something to keep in mind with the way that the admissions committee is going to see that. So if you are saying, I'm maintaining a 4.0, I'm taking multiple classes, then that's only going to benefit you because you're able to demonstrate to them that you can handle a heavy course load. Additionally, if you have other extracurriculars and things, these are things that you're going to highlight in your essays in order to, again, demonstrate how strong you are as a candidate.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
I was just going to say many universities do take into account like the trajectory of your transcripts. So if you do start with a low transcript or low GPA like I did, and then it goes up, and I was taking like 5 classes with straight A's, that is something that would make you more competitive. So again, like the trends of your GPA throughout your semesters in community college are important. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right.
I have one question. What are some mistakes that students make when writing their essays? The one that I see the most is, like I said, the resume essay. So that's when you go to say like, I've taken this class, and this class, and that's why I'm prepared for my major. That's not necessarily, they can see that on your transcript. If you're reporting all of your coursework, they know what classes you've taken. They care more about contextualizing yourself, your background, and again, how that major has made an impact on you and how you're personally connected to it.
The thing that I would say is when a client, the essays that I've read primarily, and I've now read hundreds of statements, the one thing that I see the most is telling the committee that you are a qualified applicant rather than showing them. So instead of saying, I believe that I am a strong candidate for UCLA or I'm a strong candidate for Johns Hopkins, you want to demonstrate to them what skills make you qualified and what skills do you think that are going to make you a strong student, and you want to show that to them. You're going to show that to them through examples. You're going to discuss previous experiences, perhaps an essay that you wrote or a job that you held, and the skills that you developed, the challenges you may have faced in that role, the challenges you may have faced in that project, and how it is you sought to mitigate that, and how you worked around it, and the things that you learned from that. by showing them how you make it through these processes and how you think, you're actually showing to them that you are a strong candidate rather than telling them that you are. And I see this a lot. I see this even in grad school applications. And then the second thing that I would say is being really general. Like I said during the presentation, one thing that I see very often are clients that will essentially write, I'm applying to this school because of its like well-ranked program in history and the diverse expertise of the faculty. The one way that you can differentiate yourself, however, is saying I'm applying, for example, I'm applying to UCLA or I'm applying to the College of William and Mary due to its longstanding dedication to the study of colonial American history within the history department, as is proven by the hiring of X, Y, and Z professor, or by this particular research institute that the university funds. So I want you to be as specific as possible, especially in that why statement, because the why part of the essay is where you can really set yourself up for success or just look like every other candidate.
So I would say specificity and contextualizing you. You're telling a narrative. Yes. Or showing a narrative.
Exactly. So you want to include as many details as possible.
Another question, have you helped international students to transfer? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the international transfer process is a little bit more challenging, but it is definitely possible. I've also had clients that were international students who did study at community colleges over here. I've also worked with clients, Katie, you and I have both worked with clients who have gone to other four-year universities and are now needing to transfer elsewhere because they don't like the program that they're in at the moment. This varies depending on where it is you want to transfer and the requirements, but yes, we work with a variety of clients for the transfer process. All right. Okay. Let's see. Hamza just sent me a message. I just received a research grant to lead a research project in civil conflict with a professor at JHU. Would doing research with the faculty of the university you want to apply to help your chances and show readiness to succeed at university, or look more like a desperate attempt to seem competitive? So honestly, this varies. It depends on how it is that you're actually presenting it in your statement of purpose, your personal statement. Additionally, you're going to want to make sure that you are perhaps getting a letter of recommendation from that professor, because if you're going to be working on a long-term project, that is going to be something that they're going to want to see and hear more about in your application. So if it's going to be something that you're going to be including in your CV and something you're going to discuss in your essays, this is a letter of recommendation you're going to want to seek out. It's not going to look desperate if you write it correctly in the statement. I have seen very performative statements before where somebody says, I've done this and that makes me a really strong candidate. And what you can do is instead say, while in community college or during my sophomore year in community college, I had the opportunity to work with so-and-so on this particular project. And then talk to me about that project. Tell the committee what it is about the project that you think is important for you. So what skills are you gaining from it? What type of experiences were you looking to seek out? What challenges did you face while you were on that project? And how is it that you interacted with that professor?
I would say that any work experience is valuable and important if it's directly contextual to your application. So like Kaylin said, not saying I did this, so let me in, but saying like I did this and here's why it's important to me in my educational journey.
Absolutely. Where can I see students' feedback? So we have various testimonials on our website that you can check out. You can look at the bottom of the page I believe it's at the bottom of the home page if you go to check it. Are there some credible scholarship websites? So there are a couple. College Board has a couple different resources for scholarships. There's also Scholarship Owl. Additionally, private scholarships and public sector scholarships are not often actually going to show up on the general searches. It's not going to show up on Google typically. It typically doesn't show up on Scholar or Owl. scholarship owl, sorry, and all the other types of systems. So one thing to do is to get in touch with a financial aid officer at your community college or talk to a consultant like ourselves. So that way we can help direct you to figure out what types of scholarships you may be applicable for, because this is going to depend on your nationality, your field of study, your age, where you grew up. So for example, if you grew up in the Bay Area and you are transferring as a junior and you're transferring to Berkeley, you may be applicable for specific Silicon Valley scholarships. So there's like the Silicon Valley Institute, in which case, if you grew up in the Bay Area and you went to a particular high school, you may be applicable for those types of scholarships. So my recommendation is look at those general scholarships, but you need to do a lot of digging in order to figure out what else there is. There is a lot of money out there for college, but you just need to know where to find it. And often this just requires a lot of digging and figuring out what type of search material you can use in order to find them. So for example, like I said, your nationality, where you grew up, where you went to high school, your general GPA, your field of study, all those things are going to be applicable into figuring out which scholarships are going to work for you.
A tip that I like to tell people is something that I didn't think about when I was transferring is go to the universities that you are applying to that you think you might transfer to and see if they have a scholarship database. I know UC Berkeley does have one, and that one's been really helpful for me in my scholarship search, even when I'm looking at scholarships for other people. They do a lot of the hard work for you, and at least the one on Berkeley you can filter it based on that demographic information. We have a question from YouTube. It says, what do you think about the concept of prestige and ranking in academia? And how do you balance that versus personal fit when choosing a school to transfer to?
So in terms of picking programs, my answer is very different from when talking about transferring versus when I talk about grad school. And the undergraduate institution, the prestige matters insofar as there are opportunities there that actually fit your needs. So it's both. So it's not just the ranking of the school, it's also the things that they're going to offer. Additionally, you need to think about things like environment, access to financial aid, like access to housing. So for example, some schools do not offer guaranteed housing for transfer students. And if being around transfer students is something that's important to you, or having guaranteed subsidized housing is going to be important to you, those are things to take into consideration when looking at programs. So don't just look at the world rankings or the US rankings, US news. Look at each individual university that you are somehow interested in and look at what they actually offer to transfer students. One of the biggest turnoffs for me when I was looking at schools was if they did not offer resources that were transfer specific. I got into the University of Connecticut, and it was the second best financial aid package that I received when I was applying to transfer. And I had talked to their admissions office and asked about housing, and they said, there's not guaranteed housing for transfer students, but it is possible. And secondly, they did not have an orientation. They didn't have any other additional types of resources and support systems for transfer students. You were literally just given your package of classes and sent on your way onto campus. And that made me feel very uncomfortable as a transfer student coming in with no knowledge of the system. And the one thing this is something I forgot to mention in the presentation, the transfer center at UCLA was beyond anything that I was experiencing at the other universities, and being able to figure out that not only was there a separate community, but it was a community that was actually quite large and took up a significant amount of space at UCLA, both physically, but also kind of institutionally. And that there were going to be specific resources for transfer students, including a separate orientation, a separate opening day, moving in opportunities for transfer students to actually meet and mingle. So those were things that I took into consideration. So my recommendation is look at all of these criteria in addition to prestige, because even the most prestigious universities, including Yale, including Harvard, don't have good systems for transfer students to actually get absorbed into. We're working on it. I'm part of several organizations that are looking to change this policy at a federal level and at an institutional level, but it takes time. Katie, do you have any recommendations for this?
Yeah, I was just going to speak from example a little bit because I know one of the reasons why you chose UCLA over UC Berkeley was because UCLA did offer things like guaranteed transfer housing. And that support for transfer students was really palpable for you at UCLA. I turned down UCLA even though it has a very strong anthropology department and even though it has very strong transfer presence, because at Berkeley, there were specific professors that I wanted to work with. I got better financial aid at Berkeley. I was closer to home at Berkeley. And when it comes to the anthro department at Berkeley, we are 60% transfer students in the anthro department. So even though there's no guaranteed housing and there might be a stronger transfer presence at UCLA, knowing that I would be able to find community within my department and being a little bit blown away and overwhelmed actually by the amount of outreach and support that I was being given as a transfer student at UC Berkeley was in conjunction with the prestige of the program, the classes I was going to be taking, and the proximity to my family home were things that I really took into consideration. And that has actually really paid off for me. One of my favorite things about my department is the fact that we are majority transfer students. Almost everybody that I speak to in the anthropology department can relate to my experience in some kind of way. And we've all developed, like those types of study skills, and I don't want to say coping habits, but like that transition into coming into a university, we all understand how to do it and how to help each other with it. So the strong transfer presence in my specific department was really important to me.
Absolutely. All right, so we've now come to the end of the questions. So we'll just wait another minute in case there are any additional ones. But other than that, we are going to slowly wrap up for today. Thank you all so much for joining today, especially to my colleague, Katie, for doing this presentation with me. One of the things that we are working on with Accepted is really boosting our transfer outreach. So if there are any of you that are aware of any speaking events at your community colleges that you think that Accepted should be a part of, please feel free to reach out to us. We are looking to, again, expand our connections with community colleges and focus on transfer admissions specifically. So if there's anything that we can do in order to offer up our services, then please let us know. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
And please don't forget to find us on Instagram at Accepted Consulting, and Kaylin at TheVintageAcademic, me at TheVintageAcademic. And again, if you're looking for more free resources to helping your transfer, please come find me during my office hours, and I will do my best to answer your questions.